clubs at school, reach out to an adult if you're not feeling safe. Reach out to your parents, reach out to your community members, reach out to your school officials. But we as a society need to look at this, and we need to look at what we are doing and how we are doing it, so that you guys don't have a feeling of unease when you're sitting in your classrooms.
I would echo a lot of what Jennifer said. Also, welcome. Glad to have you here in Arizona. There are a couple of facets to this, I think. One, in terms of how you can be safe and how you feel safe, laws certainly go a long way to protect people. We hear a lot of people complain about regulations. I view a lot of those regulations as protections for people. And when we look at not just laws around firearms, we look at laws around discrimination and making sure that discrimination is not allowed, and that people can be held liable if someone wants to treat you unfairly because of the color of your skin or your sexual orientation or your gender identity or whatever it may be. So laws are really important, and that's what we do at the state capitol. It's not just stopping the bad bills that could be bad laws. There have been a lot of gun bills over the years that we defeated that would have been really bad laws. So that's one thing. Another is resources, like Jennifer mentioned. When you're in school, it's important not just to have security material around the school. It's also really important to have personnel. School counselors is a really important thing. If you are in a high school of 3,000 students and you have 4 guidance counselors or 3 guidance counselors, that does not lead to a safe environment in the school. Students don't have the ability to talk to counselors and know that they can feel safe and be welcomed in that environment. So that's another thing. So looking at laws, looking at resources, looking at training, I think all of those 3 things together help create safe environments.
I appreciate your kindness, and thank you for offering to tell them.
Yes, thank you guys. We're going to go ahead and transition to our presentation now. So I'm going to hand over the floor to Tara.
Hi, my name is Tara Felicity. I'm just going to go over basically some mental health statistics and just like where Arizona lies as of right now and what we can do basically to improve. So basically, whether you know someone that has depression or anxiety, or you've gone through experiences yourself, mental health affects all of us in one way or another. Right now, among 15 to 24-year-olds, suicide is the second leading cause of death. And within a 6-year period from 2009 to 2015, the suicide rate among those age groups have increased 81%. And in the past 10 years, firearm suicides have also increased by 61%. And right now, Arizona is ranked last in the nation for mental health support. And we have a severe shortage of mental health professionals, that being like counselors, psychologists, therapists. And so right now, our student-to-counselor ratio in schools is over 1 to 900, while it should be 1 to 250. Right now, what it actually is 1 to 941. So that's way above what the national average recommends. Over 60% of adolescents ages 12 to 17 do not receive treatment for their depression. And the students that don't receive this adequate mental health support fall behind in school. And of course, something that's more pressing is you can see the correlation between math and the increase of suicides over the last few years. So, yeah,
Thank you. Okay, so now we have some questions directly from March for Our Lives students. These are just oh, okay. These are just questions that we feel as though it's very important that we address and be asked.
My name is Trey Sequeira. I'm a former student at Highland High School, and I would like to talk about the experiences that I had there and what I witnessed. So during my time at Highland, we had multiple suicides. I still don't know if the exact number is 2 or 3 because the school swept all of them under the rug. There was no acknowledgement of what led up to these, which was bullying and anxiety disorder. And there was no grief counseling, there was no support, there was no resources for those grieving and those who knew them. It was not even listed, they didn't even tell us in an email that it had happened. I heard about it from kids at school. The other experience that I had, this was after I had already left Highland, there was a bomb threat, and many of my friends who were stuck at the school during the bomb threat were stuck there for about 3 to 5 hours, and it was a very traumatic experience for them. Many of them have depression, anxiety, paranoia, they struggle from things like that, and this only spiked those conditions. And the next day they were told to come to school. They still had homework assigned. There was no resources for them to come to the school, and there was no reason why they should have had to go to school, but they still had to go because their conditions weren't acknowledged. And so with this in mind, my question to you is, what is your opinion on teaching emotional well-being and mental well-being in life classes, like life skill classes and health classes in elementary school and junior high?
Good question. Yeah, I would support having those in the training materials at the K-12 level. Those decisions can be made at the school board level when we talk about the curriculum. So I'm really glad all of you are going to the school board meetings and testifying to the school board members and lobbying them on changing their curriculums. So we tend not to mandate stuff like that at the state level when it comes to curriculum, but I think at the local level, that's something the school board should be looking at. 2 things that we're working on that kind of address what you mentioned. First is on counselors. Representative Pollock and I are working on legislation with the School Counselors Association, which we'll be introducing next week, which funds more counselors. And the way it works is the ratio that was mentioned earlier, it's over 900 to 1, it's the highest in the country. Our bill over 5 years would get that ratio down to 500 to 1, and it would appropriate about $19 million a year for 5 years to get us down to that ratio. And it also defines in statute what a counselor is, which is something the councils have really looked for. So we have bipartisan support for that, so I'm optimistic about that bill going forward. The governor outlined his budget proposal this afternoon. There is funding for more counselors in there. It's not as much as we would like. It's about $6 million this year and then an extra $6 million the year after. But that $6 million $12 million. That $12 million according to his calculations would hire over 100 more counselors. So that's a good first step. It's not enough, and we're certainly going to lobby for more when we negotiate over the budget, but that's a good first step. And the second is the suicide prevention training that I mentioned earlier. My bill last year, and the one I'm going to introduce this year, would require suicide prevention training for all school personnel in middle school and high school. And it requires that it be evidence-based, that it happens every year. So anybody who works with children in grades 6 through 12, that's librarians, that's bus drivers, that's all school personnel, have to go through that training. So those are 2 things that we're working on at the state.
And then another thing that we're working on is your guys' bill, which would allow the school districts to have a pot of money that they can use to send in grief counselors, to send in extra social workers, extra medical professionals after an incident like what you described. A lot of times they don't get that kind of response because they don't have any money to pay for it. So it is our job at the state legislature to make sure that our school districts have the financial resources to be able to provide you guys with the resources that you need.
Thank you for your responses. I appreciate the support.
Me again. Some things about me are, I'm a displaced teen. I'm a high school senior, I'm a leader, I'm a son, I'm a brother, and I prolonged my family's history of depression and anxiety. I felt alone in crowds. I slashed my thighs with the purpose of using pain to fill a void that I had. The anticipation of failure makes my heart beat so fast that I can't breathe or stop trembling, and leaves a strange feeling in my stomach that I can't differentiate from wanting to throw up or wanting to eat, so I don't do either. Despite all this, I get along just fine in my daily routine through some merit of my own, but also through the assistance that I receive from therapists that I've encountered throughout the years. Conversations with the psychology professionals have helped me apply the tools that I possess within me to live a plentiful and joyful life. And currently I am in talks with my school counselor. The only issue I've ever faced with this person is that he's just one person. In times that we're having a meeting, other students walk in wishing to have the same relief that I'm getting, because other people also face depression, they face anxiety and stress because of school, they face domestic violence, they face abuse, and they need an adult, someone with the expertise to help them manage those issues. Although my school does have a social worker, 7 administration counselors, and 2 psychologists, only one of them is an expert in student counseling. The other psychologist is determined for special ed. So my student body that exceeds 1,000 students are all overseen by this one person. This one person cannot possibly attend to all of us because of time. My question to you is, given that Arizona ranks the worst in student counselor ratios, I know you already answered this, but I would like to know specific details about how are you going to manage to reduce that ratio, and what kind of specialists are you going to bring in? Because psychologist that needs to be specialized to treat students that face the mental disorders that I discussed.
So one of the big things is going back again to your guys' bill, your March for Our Lives bill that you're putting forward this year. It will have money in that bill to be able to, if your school doesn't have a school psychologist that's able to meet with you, that money could be used to send you out to an appointment with another psychologist in the community. But also making sure that we have funding in kids care and in access for mental health resources. We need to make sure that we're able to give you guys the resources that you need, but a lot of that is going to come through the state legislature appropriating the money and then the school districts figuring out the best way to use it. And I'll let Senator Bowen talk about his bill some more because he is working on counselors.
And I forgot to mention earlier, I'll be supporting the March for Our Lives bill as well, so I just want to get that out there. As far as counselors go, we're working with the School Counselors Association on this, who represents school counselors all over the state. So our bill is a grant program. That money is appropriated for the grant program, whether it's $1 million or $10 million. States can then apply for those funds. And preference would generally tend to go to schools that where the ratio is higher. Now, a lot of schools in our district, in the Kyman School District, the Tampa Union High School District, their ratio is much smaller than in other parts of the valley. So priority would be given to schools where the ratio is 900 to 1. I've even heard of some schools where the ratio is over 1,000 to 1, which is really unacceptable. So like I mentioned earlier, the governor has included funding for that grant program in his budget. So I view that $12 million as a starting point. I'm going to try to get more in the budget for counselors. It's going to be one of my really top asks, along with more funding for K-12 and community colleges in general, trying to get more support for counselors, because I know how critically important it is. And I don't just hear it from you, I hear it when I go to the schools, and when I talk to the counselors, and when I talk to the teachers. And I visited all 45 of my schools in my district 2 years ago, and I would ask teachers and counselors and principals, you know, how can I be helpful? What's the most important thing that I should know about? And a lot of them said, we need more counselors. So we hear you. We support your bill, we support getting more counselors in the schools, and I think we're gonna make some real progress this year. It's not gonna be everything that we want, but it's gonna be a significant step in the right direction. And we can achieve that and then work towards further progress in 2020 and 2021 and on down the road until we get that ratio down to under 250 to 1.
Thank you so much for your response. Fills me with personal hope, and I urge you to keep your good work.
Hi, I'm Sunshine McKissick, and I go to Red Mountain High School. I'm a junior at Red Mountain High School. And so as like a teenager, I've watched my friends, even at the young age I am, like struggle with mental illness. I changed my certain friends, like friends that I worry about, I changed their ringtones at night. So that way, if they were to call me at 3 a.m. or just freaking out whenever, that I'll be able to like wake up and be there for them, because I'd rather like go to school in the morning like extremely tired, dog tired, just wanting to sleep, but with my friend there, rather than wake up the next morning and then not be there that day or the next. And so that's kind of why this matters to me. And so for the question I have to you guys is, have you ever been impacted by mental health, or know anyone impacted by mental health?
Yes, it's something that I struggled with a little bit in high school. I went to high school not too long ago. I graduated in 2002, so it's something that friends of mine struggled with. It's something that my siblings have struggled with, but it does seem like it's much more pronounced for kids now than it was when I was a kid. And there's a lot, technology has changed, societal pressures have changed, there's a lot of pressure to succeed for kids nowadays. So I get it, and I see it when I visit the high schools, I see it, or I hear about it when I talk to the counselors and the teachers, and that's why this issue is so critically important. And the work that you all have done has been really great in educating people and raising awareness about how important this issue is. There wasn't a lot of talk about this at the Capitol 2 years ago, and now there's a lot of talk about it, and now the governor is putting funding in the budget for more counselors. That's a significant step in the right direction. So as long as we keep active, as long as we're holding our elected officials accountable, just a show of hands, how many of you know who your legislators are? Good. That's good. You should applaud that. I can tell you most voters don't know who their legislators are. I knock on their doors and say, hi, I'm your state senator. And they're like, oh, like John McCain? And I say, no, that's U.S. Senator.
He's dead.
These are adults who vote in every election, okay? So you all are outliers in a way that you know who your legislators are. How many of you have emailed or called one of your legislators? Good. That's really good. Keep that up. Know who your legislators are. Visit them at the Capitol. Schedule appointments. You don't want to be overly aggressive. You want to be, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar, if you've heard that saying. Try to build a relationship with these folks. Educate them about why it's important to you and why it's important to your friends. And you'd be surprised at how many of them will be responsive and willing to listen to you and have that relationship.
So the question was, have I ever dealt with mental health or depression?
Have you ever been impacted by mental health, or know anyone impacted?
Yeah, so about 10 years ago, I was in a really bad car accident, and it left me, I have permanent disabilities from it. So after that car accident, I fell into a pretty deep depression. And I went to counseling, and I took the medication, and it took me about 3 years to climb out of that fog. When something deeply impacts your life, that is going to impact your life for the rest of your life, like witnessing a school shooting, like being in a horrific car accident, like having a friend kill themselves with suicide. It's okay to seek help. It's okay to seek guidance. It's okay to take the medication. Everybody needs help sometimes. And it's okay to reach out and ask for help, and it's okay to get that treatment for yourself. And it's not a selfish act to say that you need help. You are doing it, yes, for yourself, but also for everybody around you, and also to help build your future. It's okay to ask for help, and just know that it's okay to reach out and ask.
Thank you so much for sharing your stories. We really appreciate it.
Hi, my name is Charlie Safety, and so I just have a few facts I want to preface my question with. I love my school. My school is one of my favorite places to be. I love the people at my school, I love the academic programs at my school, and me and my friend were just having a conversation earlier about how it's one of the prettiest schools out there. We got a really nice grant, so there's lots of construction, and it looks really great now. But that doesn't change the fact that even though it looks good on the outside, there's not something ugly hiding on the inside. Over the past semester, we've had at least 3 plausible threats, with one where police were literally crawling all over the campus, trying to protect us from bombs. And it's not just violence against others that have been threatened, but violence to people and themselves. Several suicide threats have occurred, and there are several people every day who come into class tired, crying, with mascara running down their face, or not, just terrified of coming to school. One time I had a friend call me crying one day when we had the plausible threat, when he found out that I went to school that day, because he thought I was going to not make it back home. So my question for you guys is, how do you guys plan to make schools safer for us?
I'm sorry that you've had to deal with those situations. You guys should never have to deal with those situations. Your school should be a safe place. Each school community is different, and we need to make sure that your principals have the resources that they need to address the situations that happen on your campuses. And for us at the state capitol, that means money. We need to make sure that they have the money that they need to keep you guys safe. I know that Tempe High School District is starting to do some extensive training with a lot of their teachers on how to spot suicide cues and how to spot mental health cues. They're doing a big training with all of their teachers over the summer. I'm not sure what the other high school districts in this area are doing. I will be reaching out to superintendents and to school boards to find out what they need to be able to help you guys feel safe at your schools.
Thank you for the question. It's a very complicated issue. Funding is obviously really critically important, so making sure that school districts have the resources they need to provide those trainings, to put equipment in place, having things like the ID cards, having the Team Lifeline numbers on the back, having the counselors, all of those things are really important. Other legislation, the governor's school safety bill last year started out in a relatively good place and got significantly weakened, but those stop orders that were in that bill started in a good place. And that's a process where if a loved one is considered a threat and potentially can be violent, there's a process in place to confiscate those firearms. That's something that I think is going to be coming back this year, and I think it's something that we can look at supporting, provided that it's not weakened by the NRA and other groups like that. Universal background checks are obviously an important issue as well. Unlikely that they will get through the legislature, but it's something that we have to keep prioritizing in terms of making people safe. So I think all of those facets together, along with having more mental health support and counselors in the schools, can help make schools safer.
Thank you so much for your questions, and we appreciate your support so much. Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and transition into student questions now. If you guys signed up previously, like online and filled out a question form, you're given a number. If you can come and line up in the aisle in order with your number, and then we're gonna give you time to ask the questions as well.
I know what I'm doing there. What the hell is my number? I don't know. Somewhere. Hold that. Thanks. Great. You see it? Oh, there it is. It's blue. There's the phone. Keep going. I know what I'm doing.
Hello, my name is Amar Taran. So when I was 11, my dad passed away. And after that, pretty much, my grades were kind of dropping a little. I was in 4th grade and my grades were kind of dropping a lot. And I really needed like a counselor at the time because I was, my grades were dropping and I wasn't sure what to do. And I guess my question for you is, Arizona is worse than a nation for mental health support. So how do you plan on addressing this?
Thank you for the question, and you're right, Arizona does have the worst ratio in the country, and I think the work of March for Our Lives and other groups to raise awareness about that has been really critically important. I don't know of a lot of people who knew that we were last in the country in that 2 years ago. So the work that you all are doing to raise awareness, the work that you're doing at the school board meetings and at the Capitol is really critically important. So I just want to thank you guys again for that. I mentioned earlier the legislation that we're working on that would create a grant program to hire more school counselors. I think a lot of schools will want to hire counselors. They don't like that their ratio is 1,000 to 1 or 900 to 1. It's just they don't have the resources. And as many of you know, as a state, we're still $800 million under where we were 10 years ago for K-12 funding. We've, again, made some steps in the right direction, but we still have a really big hole in our K-12 budget, and we're doing everything we can as legislators to put pressure on the governor and our colleagues to increase that funding level. So one thing to point out is we get criticized, the legislature, for K-12 funding and what happens at the school. At the legislative level, we don't decide how much teachers are paid. We don't decide how many counselors there are. Our job as legislators is to appropriate the funds. So we have a $10.5 billion budget that's collected from sales taxes and income taxes and so on, and then we decide how that money is spent. So generally, it's per pupil funding for the schools. So the school districts and the school board members are the ones that decide how those funds are spent. So how many of you have been to a school board meeting before? I love all these hands being raised today. Holding those school board members accountable. They are elected just like we are. Now they get 4-year terms, we only get 2-year terms. But it's important to hold them accountable, and it's important to remind them how important this issue is, and pointing out how bad the ratio is, and putting more pressure for more counselors. It's supporting bond and override elections, because those help pay for counselors. So we're doing everything we can to get more funding in the schools, to allow the school districts the flexibility to hire those more counselors and have that training. The suicide prevention training that I mentioned, it takes some resources to have teachers come in and provide that training, so we're working with them on that as well. So it's a multi-pronged process that we're working really hard on, I promise.
And to echo everything that Senator Bowie just said, also another great way that you guys as young people can put pressure on our state legislature and our governor to get more money into our schools. Use social media. Use real media, use the television, use the Arizona Republic. Tell your stories. Tell your stories about why school counselors are important. Not only are we last in the nation, we're really last in the nation. I believe to get to number 47, we have to get 200 more counselors, we have to go from 1 to 900 to 1 to 700, just to move up to number 47. We're really, really far behind. And your voices matter. Your stories matter. That is how you move things and make things happen. Tell your stories. Use social media, use Twitter, use Facebook, use Instagram. Get the attention of reporters on TV, talk to them, tell your stories.
Thank you very much for your response.
Hi, my name is Evan. I am a senior in high school currently in the Gilbert area. I go to a school that's fortunate enough to have that counselor ratio that is quite low. We are about 500 to 1, and that is considered low, and we're considered lucky to have that. But with that being said, there is still a lot of issues, and a lot of the counselors do not have the time nor training to provide with them. As someone who personally has suffered from mental health and suicidal intentions as well, I understand the mindset of those people who go through that. And I've watched people suffer, and I've watched some of my friends have to go through horrible things because they do not have the resources at school. My question for you guys is, I know that you both have mentioned that you are willing to kind of put forward and make those changes, which would be really good, but what I would like to know is, what would you like to see more specifically? Like, what changes would you like to see within our school so that my peers, my friends, my loved ones, and myself don't have to worry about being silent anymore at school?
So the biggest changes I would like to see in our schools is smaller class sizes, so that our teachers have the ability to help you guys when you're in trouble. I know some of the schools in the Tempe Elementary School District have 46 kids in every class. And if you've got 46 7-year-olds, a teacher's not going to be able to sit down and see if somebody is struggling. I was lucky when I went to school. We never had more than 20 kids in our class. But I went to school in a different time, in a different place. The grown-ups in the room have not done their job. They have not gotten the money into our school systems to ensure that you guys have the same opportunities that we had growing up. That starts with the smaller class sizes, and that starts with having more access to counselors and resources on your campuses.
A lot of the changes that we would like to see would require more investment in the schools. So that's something that we're pushing. I don't know if any of you remember a year ago about this time, I mentioned the governor outlined his budget proposal today. His proposal a year ago, his proposal called for a 1% pay raise for teachers, and we were told that's it, that's all the money we have. 4 months later, it turned into 20% over 3 years. And he did that because he was under a lot of pressure, and he was on the ballot in a couple of months, and it was people showing up to the Capitol, it was people writing their legislators, calling, putting that pressure on the governor and the legislature that led to that change. So that's an example of what pressure can do, because a lot of legislators and elected officials, they like their job, they want to get reelected. So if you put pressure on them, that increases the chances that they'll listen to you. So as far as obviously more support for counselors, I'm working on a bill, like I mentioned, that creates that grant program and appropriates more funding. I mentioned the suicide prevention training. The biggest hurdle to getting that suicide prevention training in the schools are the school districts, because they call it a mandate and it's something that they have to do. It's a law. So they are putting up roadblocks to getting suicide prevention training in the schools, because it would be another logistical thing they would have to do. I would argue what is going on is a crisis, and we need that training in the schools. Now, a lot of school districts already do it, but some don't. And unless there's a mandate, they're not going to do it. So that's where we come in as legislators. So that's another thing, along with counselors, that we're working on.
So, how many of you are signed up for the state legislature's Request to Speak system? You do not need to be 18 years old or a registered voter to participate in the Request to Speak system. I'm going to give you guys a website. The website is cebv.us. There is a video on that website on how to use the request to speak system. And if you put down your email address and your name, they will go down and sign you up for that system and email you the link so that you can participate in our legislative process. The amount of space you get to comment is 144 characters. So you get to just tweet the legislature. The old version of tweets. The OG Twitter. You can go in, if a bill is being heard in committee, you can go in and make comments on that bill. And it will tell us that you live in our district. And it will show us what your comments are. And legislators do pay attention to it. And those comments become part of our official state record. So go to the website, sign up, watch the video, and participate in our legislative process. Get your voices heard.
I'll add to that. My first 2 years when I was voting on bills, every bill I vote on, I read the bill, I read the fact sheets, I look at who's signed in for and against. And there are some bills where there are like 3 people signed in favor and like 500 people against. So when I see that, I'm like, okay, clearly there's something wrong with this. Let me take a deeper look. But if it's my constituents, if it's groups like March for Our Lives, names I recognize, I say, okay, that's important. That's something I'll take into consideration as I vote. Another question, how many of you are registered to vote? So I know some of you are under 18, you're not allowed to register to vote. But what's the rule? You can register if you're going to be 18 by election day.
So if you're a senior,
that same
junior,
year.
and some sophomores, you'll have to look it up if you're a sophomore, but you guys can register.
Yeah, you can pre-register
Get out of the
as early as your 16th birthday, and it becomes active on your 18th birthday.
Yeah.
And for those registered, how many are on the permanent early voting list? That's really important too. That means you get every ballot, every time there's an election, even the local elections that barely anybody votes in, you get your ballot in the mail a couple of weeks before the election. So it's important not just for you all to do that, get your parents and your neighbors and your friends, because remember what I said earlier about holding people accountable. We'll have some wins in the legislature and we'll have some defeats in the legislature. And the next election in 2020, you can go back and see who supported the March for Our Lives bill, who opposed it, and you can hold those people accountable and try to replace them at the legislature. So doing the request to speak, getting registered, getting your friends and your fellow students and your family members registered, all of that is really critically important to drive change at the legislature.
Thank you both, and I'm excited to see what changes you guys are going to make.
We have our next speakers.
What number?
Hi, my name is Jordan. Thank you for being here. I'd like to share a little bit about my personal experience. My friend and I have experienced anxiety, depression, the aftermath of sexual assault, drug use, all these things that we don't want to see in our schools. And my school's response to this is to put suicide hotline numbers on the back of our ID cards and to give a 5-minute presentation once a year. And I feel that's inadequate. My original question was going to concern the financial aspect, but I feel you both covered that very well. So instead, I'd like to ask you to expand on how we can ask your fellow legislators and our school district to be held accountable.
Show up. Go to the meetings. They get very, very nervous when they see a bunch of orange shirts. Really, that's the best way to get their attention, is show up in person.